also very happy to see a friend, Joe, from the Remay Center, and then a friend and also teacher of mine, Matt Rice, who's sitting back there. The three of us are members of the Remay Buddhist Center, which you may have driven by if you've ever been on I-35, right around Southwest Traffic Way, Penway. And it's a beautiful old church that we have been congregating in for, gosh, I guess 10 years or so by this point. The Remay Center is celebrating its 20th anniversary at the end of this month. And so it's a thriving Buddhist Dharma center. We have a lot of people that come every Sunday for services.
What is the name again?
Remay, R-I-M-E.
R-I-M-E.
The Remay Buddhist Center. And it's a Buddhist center in the Tibetan tradition. However, Remay, which means it's kind of like what you would say ecumenical, perhaps. We are an open temple to all sorts of Buddhist traditions and schools. And so we have teachers come from many different traditions, whether it's Zen, we have insight meditation teachers, all kinds of Tibetan teachers come, Western teachers, Eastern teachers. And so I'm very fortunate and very grateful to be a part of this wonderful community. As Chad already mentioned, I have had an interest, personal interest in sustainability and environmental issues for quite some time now. And I'm also very passionate about interfaith dialogue. So I am doubly happy to be here with you tonight. I'm always very happy to share the Dharma, that is to talk about Buddhist teachings. And so when I was asked to come and talk with you tonight, I accepted without hesitation. It was only after I hung up the phone that I thought, oh, wait a minute. I don't think that 2,500 years ago the Buddha had much to say about electric cars or renewable fuel sources or recycling or sustainability. What on earth am I going to talk about? So I thought, well, what can I do? I went to some of my favorite books, looking for a place to start. I went to some of my favorite websites, blogs that I follow, and I wasn't having much luck. So as I usually do when I give up, I turned over to Facebook. And all of a sudden this pops up in my newsfeed. And here's Jon Stewart, you may know him from The Daily Show, quoted as saying, "Seems a little odd for the Catholic Church to take an environmental stance. I thought Buddhism was the religion obsessed with recycling." Jon Stewart to the rescue. Of course, as you know, Pope Francis has been making the news a lot. He's been talking a lot about environmental responsibility. And so this is what he's referring to, right? Well, in Christianity and in Judaism, one need not look much further than the creation account to find a place where to begin, a starting point to talk about our care for creation, right? Our management of creation, or our stewardship of creation. Both of these traditions, Judaism and Christianity, begin with creation, right? But Buddhism begins in a different place. Buddhism begins with suffering. Buddhism begins with, rather, the acknowledgement of the truth of suffering. There is suffering. Take a good look at that image. It's kind of blurry and it's kind of small, but that image to the right of Jon Stewart. We're going to be coming back to it, so just bear that in mind for a minute. If you don't mind, I would like to spend a few minutes, as I've mentioned, at the beginning of Buddhism. When Siddhartha Gautama, the historic Buddha, left his life of pleasure, his life of privilege in the palace, and he walked out the palace doors and walls, what he saw was suffering. He saw sickness, he saw aging, old age, and he saw death. He experienced this suffering firsthand. He saw it with his own eyes. Up until that point, he had led a life of privilege. He was a very fortunate person to have been born into a wealthy family, a family of privilege, and he had been sheltered from all of the suffering in the world. Eventually, he set off on a journey of discovery. To make a long story short, at some point during that journey, after having followed the teachings of ascetics, after following the teachings of hedonistic practices, all sorts of practices, he found that the middle way was the way to attain enlightenment or liberation from suffering. So he came back after achieving enlightenment and began to teach, and he soon developed a following of disciples and monks. And what he taught in his first teaching, or his first sermon, which is also known as the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, were the Four Noble Truths. You've probably heard about these. These are the foundation of Dharma, the foundation of Buddhist teaching, and they are as such. The truth that all existence is characterized by suffering. Number 2, the truth of the origin of suffering. Number 3, the truth of the cessation of suffering. And number 4, the truth of the Eightfold Path that leads to the cessation of suffering. And this sets the stage for how the Buddha would teach, setting the stage, addressing the problem, and then offering a solution. A lot of times when we receive teaching, so when we teach at the Ringmei Center or are taught, we are given the analogy of a doctor, right? You go to the doctor, and the doctor says, well, you're sick. That's the truth of suffering. That's the first truth. You are sick. Number 2, what is making you sick? What is the cause of your sickness, right? And number 3, there is a way to be healed from your sickness, to recover, to come through the sickness. Number 4, you must take this medicine, and this is the medicine. And in Buddhism, the Eightfold Path is the path through which we attain liberation. We're not going to go very much into detail on this, but just to kind of give you setting the stage a little bit. So how does one begin to talk about caring for creation from the perspective of a tradition that doesn't quite have a creation account? In Buddhism cosmology, we don't really have a sort of creation account. We talk about impermanence, in a sense, timelessness. All has always been. So there isn't really a creation account. So how do we as Buddhists approach our relationship to the earth when our first teaching is on suffering and how to end suffering? Well, fortunately, I'm not the first person to be asked this question. As it turns out, a number of books have already been written about this, and read, I'm sure, as well. These are just 5 of the ones that I found as I was doing a little bit of research. But there's quite a lot of work being done in the field of environmental responsibility, of ecology, from a Buddhist perspective, from the Buddhist teachings. One book that I picked up recently, in fact, is this right here, Mindfully Green, A Personal and Spiritual Guide to Whole Earth Thinking. A lovely little volume with, as it says back here, practical approaches to an eco-responsible lifestyle offer important first steps, so on and so forth. It's the Green Practice Path. So there are a lot of resources for us Buddhists in terms of how we can take practical measures in keeping for the earth and being responsible for our environment and for this planet that we share with all sentient beings. And although we haven't been getting as much press as the Catholic Church and as Pope Francis, there are in fact quite a number of Buddhist leaders who are speaking out on climate crisis, who are speaking out on environmental responsibility, renewable sources of fuel. And for instance, we have here Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi, who was addressing a gathering at the White House a few weeks ago. This was a gathering of teachers and lay leaders in Washington, D.C., Buddhist monastics, teachers, lay people. And Bhikkhu Bodhi is a scholar, monk, and founder and director of, I'm going to get this right, the Buddhist Global Relief. He addressed the issue of climate change from the Buddhist perspective, and he uses the framework of the Four Noble Truths to talk about the ecological truth of the cessation of suffering. So the ecological truth of the cessation of suffering. And he talks about an ecological noble eightfold path. So there are very practical ways to apply the teachings of the Buddha even today in terms of how we deal with the environment. There's actually much to be said about sustainability, about environmental issues, and climate crisis from a Buddhist perspective, as I've already mentioned. But tonight I want to present to you one of the most essential teachings in Buddhism, and I want to suggest that it strongly compels us, practitioners, to take a commitment to make a commitment toward environmental responsibility. And the teaching I'm talking about is dependent origination. And for that, we come back to John Stewart, of course. Or rather, we take a closer look at the image that is to his right. So, can you see this okay? Is this clear enough? This is the Bhava Chakra. It is also known as the Wheel of Life. This image is a representation of cyclic existence. Okay? It is this cyclic existence, which in Buddhism is called samsara, which we seek to attain liberation from. That is what we are trying to be liberated from, cyclic existence. We don't have all night or all week to do a thorough examination of every element represented here. But I want to just kind of cover a little bit of ground with you on this because I think it'll help us understand a little bit the Buddhist perspective. The cyclic nature of life is depicted graphically in the Bhava Chakra. By the way, this is a Sanskrit word. Bhava, the part of the word bhava, means the continuity of life and death. And chakra means wheel. Okay, so anytime you hear someone talk about chakras or Kala chakra or Bhava chakra, that suffix is the word wheel. Okay? So the wheel itself, as you can see, is held by Yama. This character back here who looks very scary and very frightening, his name is Yama. Okay? And he is also known as the Lord of Death, who is actually devouring the wheel with his fangs. This should leave no doubt that in the Buddhist view, to be caught in this vicious circle is really quite an abhorrent predicament. Okay? This is a wretched plight. You do not want to be caught in cyclic existence. Yama in this image represents as well impermanence. Okay? So the nature of life is impermanent and cyclic. Tibetan Buddhism, by the way, if you're not familiar with it, is quite a colorful and picturesque take on Buddhism. This is a tradition that uses a lot of visualization, a lot of imagery that is rich in meaning and symbolism. These are used as teaching methods, right? We understand our cosmology, we understand our thought by way of what we see. We are a very visual learning kind of people. So this is why we have all of this symbolism, all of this color, all of these images. In the top right corner, you see the Buddha. Okay, the Buddha giving his teachings, giving the Dharma. The Dharma are the teachings. On the left, we see a representation of nirvana, or liberation. Around the perimeter of the chakra, it's not very clear, but there are 12 little vignettes that you see around this ring, and these represent the 12 links of dependent origination. They're also called nidanas, 12 nidanas. These are, and I'm going to start at the top, you can't see them, but perhaps later you'll Google it and you'll see a better picture, a closer picture. But these represent ignorance, karmic formations, consciousness, name and form, sense basis, contact, feeling, craving, grasping, becoming, birth, aging, and death. Moving in from the perimeter, we see a depiction of 6 realms. This is what we call the 6 realms. And these realms are the realms of the gods, the anti-gods, the realm of animals, the realm of hell beings, the realm of hungry ghosts, and the realm of humans. Now, it's important to remember that all of this is symbolic and it is didactic. This is a way to understand. These are archetypes that help us understand the concepts and the teachings. If you can think of them as states of mind, if you will. All of these different elements are rich with meaning, and we could spend months studying them. But for our purposes tonight, I want to spend just a little more time on this area right there in the middle. So we're going to take a closer look. Now remember, this is a visual representation, as I've said, of cyclic existence. Each element is symbolic, and there is meaning. In this Bhava Chakra, which is a wheel, we see an illustration of a cycle, or a circle, a wheel that cycles. So this is a circle, and it represents cyclic existence or samsara. At the hub of the wheel, we find what is driving this cyclic existence. This is what drives the wheel. This is what keeps us in samsara or in cyclic existence. And these three elements here, as you can see, are a snake, a pig, and a bird. These animals represent the three poisons or the three delusions. And those are the origin or the cause of suffering. I mentioned in the Four Noble Truths, the first truth is their suffering. The second truth is the origin or the cause of suffering. Here you have it. That's the cause or the origin of suffering. The second noble truth. Now the three poisons are represented here with a snake, a pig, and a bird, and they are attachment or passion. The bird represents attachment, and that's because that's a bird from a region in India that is attached to its mate. So there's that grasping or that attachment, that passion. The snake represents aversion or anger. Aversion is angry, it's aggressive, and a snake, of course, is not very friendly. We'll be talking about snakes a lot tonight, I'm sorry. And then the pig represents ignorance. I'm not sure why. I think that's kind of unfriendly to pigs. I kind of like pigs, actually. But the pig represents ignorance. And these are the three root causes of suffering. This is what keeps us in cyclic existence, when what we need and what we want is to attain liberation, break free from the cycle. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about attachment, aversion, and ignorance, the three poisons. Attachment can be understood as grasping, wanting. This is desiring with fervent passion for certain things or situations to be ours or to go our way. And our judgment is clouded by the delusion that things should or must be the way we want them in order for us to be happy and free from suffering. Attachment. Oftentimes we confuse love with. Is that an alarm we need to pay attention?
No,
I'm sure somebody is keeping an eye on that.
They'll tell us.
Oftentimes we can confuse attachment with love. At the Rima Center, Lama Chuck, who's our spiritual director, once gave a talk about the difference between love and attachment, and I love this illustration. He was holding a coin. He's also a magician, so he has tricks up his sleeve. And he doesn't wear sleeves, so that's really kind of amazing. But he was holding a coin, and he said, this is how you love, with an open hand, right? You can still hold the coin, but your hand is open. This is how you're attached. You're holding the coin, but you're not letting go. You're grasping. You're really holding on. It's aggressive. It's not passive. And well, that's attachment. Aversion, in many ways, is the opposite of attachment. I don't want that. I don't want this thing in my life. I don't want things to go this way. I don't want that person to come and talk to me right now. And so we hide, we turn away, we recoil from things and situations we don't want. And ignorance refers not only to stupidity or lack of understanding, but it also means simply being in the dark about situations, conditions, and things. These delusions or poisons, these roots of our suffering, cause us to see reality not as it truly is, but as we wish it to be. So you're probably wondering what all these pictures and concepts have to do with environmental responsibility. Please bear with me. I promise that I will find a point somewhere in this image or elsewhere. This is all part of the Buddhist teaching of Pratitya Samutpada. Pratitya Samutpada. Anybody want to say that? Here. Pratitya Samutpada. A Sanskrit word meaning dependent origination or dependent arising. Dependent origination states that all things and phenomena arise in dependence of other things, in space dependence of other things. If this exists, that exists. If this ceases to exist, that ceases to exist. This is a very complex teaching, and although I have spent some time studying this, I can only claim to have but a primitive understanding of it. My teacher, Matt, will keep me honest, I am sure, and throw something at me if I get this all wrong. But this goes beyond the laws of cause and effect, and it is at the heart of how Buddhists believe liberation can be attained. So this is a very important and a very fundamental teaching for us. And tonight, I am suggesting that it also speaks to us about our responsibility for the caring of our environment and the earth that we share with all sentient beings. His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, who, by the way, turns 80 today.
Wow.
Yes, today. Very auspicious day for us. When speaking on dependent origination, in his book Ethics for the New Millennium, he says the following: the close connection between how we perceive ourselves in relation to the world we inhabit and our behavior in response to it means that our understanding of phenomena is crucially significant. If we don't understand phenomena, we are more likely to do things to harm ourselves and others. When we consider the matter, we start to see that we cannot finally separate out any phenomena from the context of other phenomena. We can only really speak in terms of relationships. His Holiness goes on to explain in this chapter that we can understand how things and events come to be in three different ways. Cause and effect is the first way. All things and events arise in dependence of a complex web of interrelated causes and conditions. This means that no thing or event can be construed as capable of existing in and of itself, or remaining in existence by itself. Nothing exists in a vacuum. There are all these causes and conditions that lead to the existence or the arising of this thing or phenomena or situation. The second is mutual dependence. Without parts, there can be no whole. Without a whole, the concept of parts makes no sense. The idea of a whole is predicated, it depends upon parts, but these parts themselves must be considered to be wholes comprised of their own parts. So, mutual dependence. Number 3, dependently originated. All phenomena can be understood to be dependently originated because when we analyze phenomena, we find that they lack independent identity. For instance, the words action and agent mean nothing one without the other. So do parent and child. You're not a parent unless you have a child, and you're not a child without having a parent. All things are mutually dependent. So causes and effects, mutual dependence, and dependently originated. Understanding this notion of dependent origination has a number of important implications for us, not simply for Buddhists, but for us in general. Being able to hold this view means that when we see that everything that we perceive, phenomena, things, situations, everything that we see arises as a result of an indefinite series of interrelated causes and conditions. Our whole perspective changes when we understand this. There is a field of studies that I'm just now kind of beginning to learn about, deep ecology. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with this. It has a lot to do with these concepts. And we are talking about concepts that are 2,500 years old. Very scientific in nature. This is a baby python. I told you we were going to be talking about snakes on tonight. Is that not the cutest, cuddliest thing you've ever seen? No? Why not? Well, enough people found these to be cute and cuddly that in the 1970s there was quite a market for this exotic pet trade. It was very, very lucrative. It's believed that at least 2 million constrictor snakes were imported in the last 30 or 40 years. And Miami, Florida, is an important hub for this exotic pet market, right? That's a lot of snakes that have no business being in Florida. They are not native to Florida. But, as we all know, or as we should have known, baby Burmese pythons don't stay cute and cuddly very long. Soon enough, they grow to be 8, 12, 16 feet long. And in some cases, they have found pythons that are 20 feet long. That's what they look like in the wild, in the Florida Everglades. How's that for a house pet? Well, what started happening was the people that bought these pythons, soon enough they realize I can't really keep a 18-foot snake in my house. I'm going to release it. And enough people started releasing these pythons. And some of them, of course, escaped as well. These are slithery beings. Enough of these made their way into the Florida Everglades, where they multiplied. They are very prolific breeders. They multiplied again and again and again. And recent estimates from the National Park Service put the numbers as high as 100,000.
Oh my goodness.
But really, nobody knows. There could be a lot more. These snakes are virtually impossible to spot in the wild. When you see it, it's probably already too late. The problem now is that these snakes are literally eating through the Everglades. It's an all-you-can-eat buffet, and they have no challenge. They have no predators. They are at the top of the food chain, and they are absolutely wrecking the ecosystem. They will eat anything. They will eat birds, rabbits, possums, raccoons, deer, and even alligators. And you can Google those images on your own time. They are not pretty. They have found snakes. If you look at it, and it looks like they swallowed a van, and they have to open them up because they can't. I mean, they're very ambitious, and they have an unquenchable thirst and hunger. They're basically destroying one of the nation's most precious ecological treasures, and there doesn't seem to be anything anyone can do about it. There really doesn't seem to be anything we can do about it. And to think that it all started with tiny little baby pythons. Cute, cuddly critters. Nobody gave much thought to the fact that they wouldn't stay little, they wouldn't stay this size. The causes and conditions that created this were, of course, the market, greed, ignorance. Hey, that kind of sounds familiar. Attachment, aversion, ignorance. And the chain of events that this behavior, that this trend unraveled, has resulted in a problem of apocalyptic proportions. These pythons, voracious hunters and prolific breeders, are not staying put. They're not just staying in the Everglades. Pretty soon there's not going to be enough room for them there. Some scientists, this is challenged a little bit, but some scientists predict that in the coming decades, they will start to make their way across 1/3 of the country. So by the year 2100, they might be in New York. Kind of makes you think of that movie Snakes on a Plane. It can happen.
What is their natural predator?
Excuse me?
What's their natural
I
predator?
don't know, but it's somewhere in Burma. Not in the Everglades, clearly. That's a good question. I did not look that up. I should have. Yeah. So it doesn't take much to see how ignoring the basic truth of cause and effect, of dependent origination, keeps us in this cycle of samsaric existence. Of course, this is an example that I'm using to illustrate in a very broad kind of base way what happens when we don't pay attention not only to the causes and conditions that brought us to this place in time, to this situation, but also not thinking about the causes and conditions that these will in turn engender. What will happen now that we have this problem? We don't know. It's a serious problem. And it all started with exotic pets. Baby Burmese pythons. Even a basic grasp of dependent origination can help us, Buddhists and non-Buddhists, see that the universe can be understood in terms of a living organism where each cell works in cooperation with every other cell, and this sustains the whole. We are dependent upon each other. We are not hermits. We cannot live, function, and operate away, apart from each other. We need each other. There's been a story recently, a local story here in our region. There's a farm, Buds and Berries. Did I get that name right? Buds and Berries, a local organic farm, a small operation, a small family operation. And they have worked very hard to achieve their organic certification. If you know anything about organic farming, you know that you have to jump through all kinds of hoops. You have to prove yourself for many, many years. You have to pay a lot of fees and pass a great deal of inspections and rigor in order to achieve this certification. And it can be lost very easily. And in fact, in the last couple of months, they have unfortunately lost their certification, not for anything that they did, but because a farm upstream from them, because of all this rain that we've been blessed with, has had runoff, and they are a conventional farming operation, and their chemicals, their fertilizers, have ended up in the soil of buds and berries. And now they have lost their accreditation, and they cannot be certified again for another 4 or 6 years. Causes and conditions: attachment, aversion, ignorance, not knowing what can happen in case of severe storms and weather like we've had, not thinking through all of the causes and conditions that arise that bring us to a particular point in time. So we understand by way of dependent origination that it's life is like a living organism where each cell works in cooperation with every other cell. And in this, it sustains the whole. If even one of these cells is harmed, the balance is harmed and the whole is endangered. This should suggest to us, I would like to contend, that our individual well-being is intimately connected with the well-being of all others and with the well-being of the environment we share. And this is also a Buddhist principle. Compassion. Right? Wisdom and compassion go hand in hand. And compassion means that we think of others before we think of ourselves. And this is at the core of Buddhist teaching. Today, as I mentioned, is His Holiness' 80th birthday. And he said he doesn't want any presents. All he wants is for people, all people, to do something compassionate today, to engage in compassionate behavior, compassionate to one another. A very simple thing, it seems, very difficult in practice. And that's why we need teachings and visual instruction. I want to show you something that is a take on the Baba Chakra. When we look at this, we are looking at something that is perhaps close to 1,000 years old, this teaching. And this approach to illustrating the different meanings and archetypes and symbols and states of mind. But there is a Buddhist thinker, artist, writer, who has taken this Baba Chakra and put a Western spin on it. So I present to you Americosmos.
I like it. Oh, I like it.
So take that in for a minute. I don't know if you can see from where you're sitting, but the three delusions here are, of course, money,
Tanks.
war,
What's
and this looks like a computer. I think it's a
TV.
or a TV. Yeah, but I think that must be the pig.
yeah, the ignorance is about right.
Then here we see, of course, ignorance. We see all of these, and there we see Yama or Uncle Sam, right? Very enraged, capitalistic, powerful image. This is the work of Darren Durda, whom I mentioned a moment ago. He's, I forgot to say, he's also a musician. He's a teacher and practitioner of insight meditation as well. He has recently actually written a book called The Four Global Truths. I love that word, Four Noble Truths, the Four Global Truths. And he uses the framework of the Four Noble Truths to address worldwide ecological suffering. So this reminds me a little bit of something I said in the beginning about the Buddha not having said anything about electric cars or recycling, sustainability. I mean, this should be obvious, right? He lived before factory farming. He lived and died before Monsanto, before British Petroleum, before wind turbines. And yet, we see again that the Dharma is timeless. The teachings are timeless, and they are applicable for us today. And they have a lot to say to us. These teachings that the Buddha spoke 2,500 years ago not only talk to us about how we can attain spiritual liberation from cyclic existence, but they also talk about how the Dharma compels us. They illustrate how in the Dharma we are compelled to care for one another, to be mindful of one another, to understand that if I exist, you exist, that if you cease to exist, I cease to exist, that we are dependent upon each other. And so this compels us, among other things, to care for this home that we share on planet Earth. Putting these teachings into practice, we see how our every action, everything we do throughout our day, from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to bed, our words, our thoughts, our deeds, regardless of how small or inconsequential these may seem, they have an implication not only for ourselves, but for all others. When I take action, when I do things, the purchases I make, the decisions I make, the choices I make throughout my day have an implication on those around me. In this way, understanding this, we can appreciate how our behaviors and our activities become causes and conditions for future phenomena. We see nowadays, in the age of information, very at the click of a few buttons, we can see the images of the massive devastation that our lifestyle is causing all over the world. We see these islands of trash in the ocean. We see horrible working conditions across the ocean and other parts of the world to sustain and to maintain our lifestyle. These are the conditions that we are creating because they are dependent upon us and we are dependent upon them. So this should compel us, I would like to suggest, to be mindful of the resources that we use, to be mindful of the choices that we make every day, and it should compel us to become engaged in caring for the earth. And I would like to say that as Buddhists, this is very much the core teaching. Everything that we do, everything that we say, must take into account the effect, the impact that it has on those around us. That is what it means to be compassionate, to exchange self for other. So, in short, this essential Buddhist teaching of dependent origination, of which I've given you the Cliff's Notes, I've barely scratched the surface. It calls us to be responsible and compassionate, cohabitants of the earth. I'm going to bring this to a close here in a few minutes because I want to make sure that we have time for conversation. But before I close, I want to leave you with a poem that was written by Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh. You may be familiar with Thich Nhat Hanh. He is a wonderful, amazing teacher that we are very fortunate to be living in the same time as he is. In his teachings, when he talks about dependent origination or dependent arising, he uses a very particular word that I think he coined, and that word is interbeing. He talks about interbeing. This is, I think, a very helpful word. It's a little bit easier to understand than dependent origination, which sounds very academic and scholarly, and maybe a little bit unapproachable. But he talks about interbeing. And in this way, he illustrates the interwoven nature of our existence. So if you'll allow me, I'm going to read for you this poem. It is titled Clouds in Each Paper. If you are a poet, you will see clearly that there is a cloud floating in this sheet of paper. Without a cloud, there will be no rain. Without rain, the trees cannot grow. And without trees, we cannot make paper. The cloud is essential for the paper to exist. If the cloud is not there, the sheet of paper cannot be here either. So we can say that the cloud and the paper are. Interbeing is a word that is not in the dictionary yet, but if we combine the prefix inter with the verb to be, we have a new verb, interbe. Without a cloud, we cannot have paper. So we can say that the cloud and the sheet of paper are. If we look into this sheet of paper even more deeply, we can see the sunshine in it. If the sunshine is not there, the forest cannot grow. In fact, nothing can grow. Even we cannot grow without sunshine. And so we know that the sunshine is also in this sheet of paper. The paper and the sunshine are. And if we continue to look, we can see the logger who cut the tree and brought it to the mill to be transformed into paper. And we see the wheat. We know that the logger could not exist without his daily bread. And therefore, the wheat that became his bread is also in this sheet of paper. And the logger's father and mother are in it too. When we look in this way, we see that without all of these things, this sheet of paper cannot